Welcome back to the Norfolk Currents podcast. I'm Paul Rice. We're joined today with Rich Meredith of Meredith Construction. Rich, how you doing?
Doing well, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, Rich, I want to kick off. How did you come to Norfolk? When did you first move here, or were you born here?
Yeah, sure. So I was born here. I'm a proud Norfolkian, born and raised. I did leave the area for college, and then I was in and out of D.C. for about 15 years. I returned to town in 2017, the end of 2017, and have been working at the family business, what I call working at the family farm, since that time.
Awesome. And so the family farm, as you alluded to, Meredith Construction, what's your role there, and what is Meredith Construction more generally?
Yeah, so Meredith Construction is over a 100-year-old firm, so I'm now part of the fourth generation that's working for the family business. It's morphed considerably over that time frame. We initially built single-family homes. That went into overdrive for folks, for GIs returning from World War II. And then over the years, it's morphed from residential to churches and schools, conventional commercial. And then probably in the 90s, we stopped doing what's called bid construction and started building just for ourselves, mainly multifamily apartments. And that's grown a little bit since then, but we've really dipped our toes back into the development side of the business with this project, with the Railyard at Lambert's Point. And I'm vice president for commercial management, and I lead all of our development and acquisition activities.
Yeah, that's awesome. So 100 years of history of a company. What's it like seeing the maybe different iterations or evolutions of Meredith through, a couple of generations like that?
I mean, it's really special to be able to go into our office, and our conference room really hasn't changed since probably the Carter administration. The only thing that's changed is maybe I've hung my diploma, or my business partner has hung his diploma, but it's neat to go in and see hanging on the wall pictures of my great-grandfather and see pictures of projects that my dad or my uncle or other family members have worked on over the last number of decades. So it's really special to be a part of that.
And do you still have other family in the firm with you and working together?
I do, yeah. I've got an aunt who works with us, and then I've got a cousin who works with us, and then my business partner is my cousin's husband.
Awesome. Yeah. Still tight-knit.
Yeah, it's tight-knit. And then our CEO is my uncle, and he's been the CEO since the 70s.
Cool. And so you said that today you guys aren't doing any bid construction, but you're doing construction in some form and management in some form. Can you tell us about what is the scope of work that Meredith Construction does?
Yeah, so like I said, Meredith Construction does very little construction these days. We haven't done bid work for quite some time. The bulk of our work is property management, specifically multifamily management, mostly in Norfolk, some in Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, and then we also manage a couple shopping centers and some industrial properties. So that's the bulk of our work. And then we're getting back into the development business, and that's most of what we do.
Okay. So you've got all these projects in Norfolk going on. Do you approach these differently given your kind of 100-year history here and presumably the commitment to the community?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question. So we only have just the one project going on right now, and we've been working on the Railyard now for going on 6 years. It was delayed for 2 years due to COVID, but it has been a big undertaking. 120,000 square foot grocery anchored retail, office, restaurant, shopping center. It spans 4 city blocks. It's a pretty intricate development. The short answer is yes. I think it's safe to say that most in the real estate development world, we can focus on two things. We can focus on quantitative returns, and then we could also look at qualitative returns. And it's no secret that most pay very close attention to and care most about quantitative returns. It makes sense. That's how our economy runs. But as a local, my office is right across the street. My office is on 24th Street. We're really focusing on the qualitative returns as well. I grew up driving down Hampton Boulevard. We've owned those warehouses that maybe folks see since the 70s. And as soon as I moved home, I realized that I wanted to be a part of saving those buildings as opposed to tearing them down. So the answer is yes. I mean, the Lambert's Point docks, the Lambert's Point neighborhood, these buildings are a part of that history. They played a role in what was a major economic engine for the city, perhaps even the East Coast, and it felt wrong to tear them down. And so we said, why not save the historic buildings and build something around them?
Yeah, well, that's a huge project and undertaking. How does that stack up to maybe other projects that the company's taken on in the past?
Well, we haven't done a development project for many years.
Okay.
This is much larger in the sense that typically what we've done in the past is we will buy an older multifamily property and then renovate it and then own it and manage it.
Yeah.
This is ground up construction plus historic adaptive reuse plus putting in a grocery store. So it's bigger than anything we've done in a long time, and I'm really happy that we have the partners that we have as we work to complete this project.
Awesome. So you mentioned partners. I know you're working with the likes of Compo Construction, who is local, and also CCB, which is Charlotte-based. Yep. So can you tell us about all the different partners you're using and, kind of what role they play in the development?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question, and this kind of ties back to your earlier question. We're building and delivering to West Norfolk and to perhaps Hampton Roads writ large, something that where we want to shop, something that we want to see. I think it's worth noting that aside from our Charlotte-based equity partner, development partner, Clear Creek Brothers, everyone on this project is local. And by local, I mean they live and work in either Norfolk or Hampton Roads. I think there are a few people at the beach. But yeah, Compo Construction, Work Program Architects. In fact, I think they're right next door. I'm looking at...
Yeah, you can see them right across.
Mel through the window right there. Timmons is our engineer. Colliers International is our leasing team. They're based in Norfolk. So everybody who works on this, it's not like we're out of towners. There's a little more motivation, a little more intrinsic motivation to see something delivered that's pretty special, and I think we're seeing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you think that's unusual for the broader real estate development industry to see so many very close to home teams working together on a project?
I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not an incredibly huge development, so I think it's common to see a lot of local partners working on it, but it's also not uncommon to pull in maybe an out-of-town architect because they're perhaps a little cheaper, or an out-of-town engineer to do the design work, maybe because it's a little more cost-effective. But it is special in the sense that most people who are a part of this project live in miles of the project, and I haven't seen that before.
So they've got an extra vested interest in making sure that this is a great place to live, work, hang out.
Yeah, the guy who's the lead architect at WP, his name is Jacob Comby. He now has his own studio called Arc Smith Studios. He lives in West Ghent, and I live in the Freemason district. And he and I, when we were designing this thing, we jokingly said we're designing this so that we design a place where we want to go, where we want to hang out. And I think the answer is yes. We laugh and we say that, but it's a little more than that. We want to create a place where whether you're an ODU student or a nurse or a doctor within the hospital system, or you live in Larchmont or Lambert's Point or West Ghent, everyone feels welcome, and we're creating a space for everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the press releases say that the project is going to be about a $40 million investment overall. What's it like raising the funds to make a project like that happen?
Well, I will say that the project has increased by almost 40%.
Wow.
Since we've started the project, because we initially estimated it, and we're ready to start construction in probably like March of 2020.
Yeah.
Right? All right. So we put the project on hold for 2 years, a little less than 2 years, while COVID worked its way through the world. When we repriced it, as I'm sure everyone knows, materials increased. We still decided to press forward and deliver. Raising the funds, I mean, we use a combination of internally raised funds, and we leverage local banking relationships. We raised some funds with a local bank called Integrity Bank for Business. And then as far as our partners, they're Charlotte-based, so they brought some funds from outside the state.
And was that your first time having to kind of assemble the different funding sources together for a deal, if you guys don't do deals this often?
Yeah, this is the first time I'd done that. I did it in grad school, but it's one thing to get a degree and work on it in grad school. It's nothing to actually do it in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've learned a lot along the way, and I continue to learn a lot every day I'm on this job.
And so on that same kind of financial train, historic tax credits definitely play a part in this project. Can you tell us more about how that works and what role they play?
Yeah, sure. So to take us just a brief step back, starting in the early 2000s, for your listeners who have been a part of the Hampton Roads community for many years will perhaps remember that a series of different development groups attempted to develop our circa 10 acres, or including what is now the IP configure space behind us, and that would take it to about 15 acres. Mm-hmm. And they did it every time without success. And in all of those, our company was always just going to sell our old buildings. Mm-hmm. And development ideas over the last, let's say that multi-year period, was a value grocery store, a high-end grocery store, student housing, market rate apartments, office, co-working, townhouses. And when the last deal fell through in 2018, it was with a large national developer called S.J. Collins out of Florida. And when that deal did not come to fruition, we took a look at what caused the project not to move forward. Mm-hmm. And we determined there was really two things. One, landowners, including us and then those around us, were selling their land for too high a price, right? 4 different developers. As soon as someone offers to pay you a certain amount for something, and then that falls through, the next time is a little higher, and the next time is a little higher, and so forth and so on. So we had to address the land price issue. And then the other was, and I don't know the background on this, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not saying anything to that effect, but my understanding was that the city was requiring the developer to widen Hampton Boulevard by 1 lane. Again, the underpass wouldn't widen, so there would have been a bottleneck issue, but nonetheless, so that what that did is that ended up increasing the cost of the project by about 10 to 12%, and it reduced the land on which the developer could build. So we stepped back and we said, listen, if we keep our buildings that we own, which I wanted to save anyway, we don't have to widen Hampton Boulevard because we already own the buildings by right. And we can then develop around those historic buildings. And instead of creating, I guess, what I would call a conventional neighborhood shopping center, we could make something that had a semi-industrial feel and design and deliver new construction that didn't necessarily look exactly like our historic buildings, but perhaps they would rhyme. And so that's what we did. In order for it to work, we needed to use municipal, state, and federal incentive programs to offset the costs associated with renovating these historic properties. Locally, we're using the city's tax abatement program. If anyone is not familiar with it, look it up on the city's website. You can access it for historic properties, for both commercial and maybe for residential buildings. I'm not sure.
And is that just in overlay districts like the historic railroad area?
No, the tax abatement program is, I believe, citywide. I believe the building has to be of a certain vintage. It's basically a rehabilitation credit where, well, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time going into the details of that. It's all on the city's website, but that's the local benefit. And then the state and federal are historic tax credits, and we're using those for 3 of the historic buildings. And essentially what it does is it just reduces the cost to deliver the building, to renovate it. And so, when we take our buildings to market and lease them to, or look to lease them to prospective tenants, new construction, because it's incredibly costly, we have to rent in, let's say, the $30 per square foot and up. But for the adaptive reuse, because we've used the tax credits and we've reduced the cost, we can offer to, and what we're targeting for the historic buildings, local, regional users, rents in the 20s. So it's a little bit more approachable. For those of your listeners who've maybe looked at the site plan or looked at the fly-through, the historic buildings tend to focus in on this common area courtyard. We want to program that courtyard with local and regional tenants, and the tax credits allow us to do that. We pass the benefits on to the tenants in the form of lower rents.
That's awesome. And so mentioning tenants, I know you've announced some kind of exciting tenants that maybe aren't, found in the west side of Norfolk. Can you tell us more about how you're going about like attracting and, seeking out those tenants and who some of those might be?
Yeah, sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is that we did officially close with Lidl. So we're excited that Lidl will be coming to the project. It was really important to us that we delivered a grocery store, particularly what many would describe as a value grocery store on this side of Hampton Boulevard. One of the first things we did when we started this process back in 2018 was to go around and meet with different civic leagues, and Lambert's Point Civic League, and then West Ghent in particular. They said, we'd love a grocery store. So we're excited that we're able to deliver that. As far as tenants go, we leased the new construction first, and that's because in order for our partners to acquire their construction loan, a certain percentage of the square footage needed to be pre-leased.
Yeah.
So you'll notice new construction is all pre-leased, first floor. Second floor is still available. That's mostly office or medical use. That tends to come in later or last. But starting from the north, we have Chicken Salad Chick, which is an Alabama-based chicken salad restaurant. I actually had them for the first time over the summer in North Carolina. I thought it was fantastic. So their build-out's going on now. That'll probably take 2-3 months. I would anticipate them opening in the, December timeframe. I don't want to speak for the contractor, but in the near term. Vogue Medi Spa will share the first building with them. And then as you head south, the drive-through will be a Jimmy John's. I'm pretty sure that's the franchisee relocating from 21st Street.
Okay.
So they want to be a little bit closer to the naval base, a little bit closer to the hospital system. Next door to them is Nothing But Cakes. Nothing But Cakes is open now, and they're great. I mean, like I said, my office is across the street from the development, and I've gone to Nothing But Cakes a couple times.
Yeah, a little dangerous for the waistline there.
Yeah, no joke. We have Domoishi Ramen in one of the historic buildings. And then as you get into that large block with the courtyard, we've got Club Pilates and Cycle Bar and Sushi King, a new ABC store. It's actually a big 4,000 square foot ABC store. It's modeled after the one at Town Center. And then a nail salon. And then in the middle of that will be Stretch Lab. For our adaptive reuse, we signed a lease with Biscuit Belly, breakfast restaurant. Okay. There's one currently in Chesapeake on Volvo Parkway. It's great. I mean, I went out and checked it out, and they're going to do quite well. And then for our historic buildings, now that the ground floor is leased, now we're really starting to finish leasing up our historic spaces. I can say that we're finishing up a lease with an 8,000 square foot restaurant, bar, entertainment user, which would be great. We're talking with a couple different restaurants, a couple soft goods users, like conventional retail users, and then the half of our building that faces the Lidl, that faces 24th Street, that'll probably be service-based businesses. We're still looking for a salon or something like that. Someone goes and shops at Lidl and they go across the street and they go to some type of service. So that's kind of our breakdown for right now.
And do you think the way that you're seeking out or looking for those tenants is different from firms or projects that maybe aren't as, local based and have the kind of deep ties?
It's a good question. Colliers does an excellent job because they have, it's a large, it's certainly national. Colliers may be international. I don't really know, but they can reach out nationally for large tenants, which they did for the new construction. But then they also maintain deep relationships locally and then regionally. So Colliers has 2 people just in Hampton Roads looking for local or regional users to come to our adaptive reuse space or fill our office medical space. And then they have one individual who's in Richmond just focusing on regional users outside of Hampton Roads, trying to pull them into our market.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, we're really taking our time to find the right mix of tenants for that courtyard space, because we know that there needs to be this synergistic effect, and we will take our time to fill the spaces with the right tenants for the courtyard space.
Awesome. In part, no doubt, because you live so close and you want to enjoy that space as well.
Yeah, man,
right?
That's right. Yeah, I want to, it's on the ERT,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a huge proponent of the ERT. I ran on the ERT this morning. And so we want to create a space where people can ride, bike, walk, or drive. And yeah, I mean, that's the goal.
In the plan, there's a fair amount of those bike and pedestrian amenities kind of like already outlined or named out. Is there anything you can tell us about what that's going to look like on the bike pedestrian front in the finished product?
Not only that there will be significant bike racks throughout the development. It's not like it's all just going to be in one location next to the grocery store. I believe we have them on every block. Maybe not the northernmost block where that single building is, but there are multiple bike stations. We've told the folks at the ERT that we're happy to host one of those bike maintenance stations that they have throughout the ERT. You know, the ERT runs down Hampton Boulevard, and then it, I think, officially cuts down on either 26th or 27th Street, but most people cut down 25th because that's where the bridge is going into the neighborhood. So we imagine most people will take a hard right down 24th, or they'll meander through the courtyard, and we recognize that, we support that, we want to see that happen. And so, you know, we're going to put in bike racks, or what do we have to do to draw, you know, those folks who choose not to use cars.
I've noticed the kind of curb and sidewalk enhancements on Hampton Boulevard, especially on the most southern end towards the underpass there. Is that specifically around trying to widen those sidewalks to accommodate the ERT better?
Curb enhancements?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and our architect will be happy that you pointed that out. So it's certainly along 27th to maybe the underpass, the sidewalks were road, sidewalk, let's say grass or tree buffer, and then a building.
Yeah.
But what we've done is we've inverted the buffer and the sidewalk so that when someone is on the ERT or on the sidewalk, they're not immediately next to a car. There's some buffer of grass or a shrub or something, so that folks don't feel so close to the 18-wheelers that come barreling down Hampton Boulevard throughout the workday.
Yeah, there's definitely some speed demons that fly through there, right?
Yep.
So.
Oh, yeah.
And so you mentioned the hurdles you guys faced in the pandemic. What was that like? What kind of obstacles came up, and how did you navigate that?
Well, I guess I'd start by saying it feels kind of silly to talk about the hurdles and the challenges that we faced during COVID when people actually had experienced loss.
Yeah.
That said, yeah, I mean, we, like many developers in the area or throughout, I guess, the world, we pressed pause. We had to regroup. Sources of capital essentially dried up, or at least people said, hold, we're going to see what happens for a little while. Tenants who had signed up to come to the development exercised a kick-out clause or a provision that said they didn't have to agree to the terms. And I don't blame them. I probably would have done the same thing given the uncertainties of COVID. And then, of course, when we did break ground, we had cost increase issues and availability of materials, whether it's concrete pipe for the storm system or air conditioning units on the tops of buildings. Everything was delayed.
Yeah.
So it was a chance to learn a lot and work through those issues. I guess the big takeaway for me is we were kind of able to spend, we initially weren't going to have a grocery store, but because we knew the project was going to be delayed for a significant period of time, it gave us time to approach a number of grocers. And we spent 6 months courting Lidl, and once Lidl signed the contract, we were able then to attract, I guess I could say, a different tenor of tenants. And so while it was delayed for almost 2 years, the finished product, I think, is stronger for West Norfolk, certainly stronger for the Lambert's Point community, and stronger for folks working on the base or folks who live in Larchmont or Ghent or work in the hospital system.
Outside of the different tenants that you might attract with Lidl there, did the site plan change any at all between that kind of like January, February 2020 to then, post-pandemic, getting the wheels rolling again?
Yeah, no, not really. The site plan is essentially the same. It's just that original footprint had us saving the big building next to the train tracks. That is now torn down, and Lidl is going to go literally right where that's going. We were able to configure a few more parking spaces, which is always nice, but most of the development is the same. I will note for your listeners who go to the website and look at the fly-through,
Yeah.
our architect designed a very beautiful courtyard with brick pavers and trees, and we would have loved to deliver that. However, because this is a historic tax credit building, the tax credit folks said that the courtyard needed to look a little more industrial because it was a former industrial space.
Okay.
So we can't use brick pavers. We have to use concrete, but we're going to sandblast the concrete to give it a different texture. And we can't plant trees, but we can have lots of plants in very heavy, permanent like vases. So it's going to look slightly different, but structurally, most of it remains the same.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, you mentioned having a lot of parking spaces.
Yeah.
Did you guys find it difficult to balance the parking spaces and the kind of bike and pedestrian uses that you wanted and having a lot of car traffic there?
For better or for worse, retail demands as many parking spaces as possible. We tend to try to look at a development and think, okay, well, what are the parking requirements going to be 30, 40, 50 years from now? Because that's kind of the lifespan of a retail development. The short answer is yes, but we were able to work with our architect, who's very good at finding ways to fit in parking spaces, but also create room for multimodal transportation use. One thing I'll note that your listeners will recognize is that, you know, if you go and look at it, let's say an old shopping center built in, I don't know, the 80s or the 90s, usually you've got the parking lot along the highway, and then you look back and you see the grocery store in the far back. So you look at the parking lot, and that's aesthetically not very pleasing. But we conformed to the Hampton Boulevard corridor plan that our architect worked with the city on that says, hey, let's bring the buildings close to Hampton Boulevard because that's historically where they were positioned, and then let's kind of hide the parking in the back. So the majority of our parking is in the southwest corner of the development. There's more parking in this shopping center than I think anyone in, let's say, West Norfolk. But as you drive down Hampton Boulevard, you don't see this huge parking field. It's kind of obfuscated away and blocked by the grocery store.
Awesome. And then how soon do you think before folks are actually going to be able to come by and start shopping at some of these different places?
Yeah, man. So we're completing buildings working from the north to the south. So as folks drive, I guess, south, heading toward the underpass or heading toward downtown, they'll see that the first few buildings look like they're ready. The shells are finished. Tenants are in there now starting to do their build-outs, or they're open, like nothing but cakes. So over the next few months, you'll see those tenants start to open. Then we'll finish the big block that is sandwiched between 24th and 25th Streets. Those shells will be finished late September, early October. So then you'll see those tenants start to do their build-outs. Build-outs take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending on build-out intricacy. So then those buildings will come online. And then for Lidl, we have to prepare a pad for them. So we have to clear out the existing building, bring in utilities, put in curb and gutter for them, and then they'll build their structure. I imagine the pad for them will be prepared in the November timeframe, turn it around in December of 2023, and it'll take them about a year to build their structure. So, you know, without any firm plans from Lidl specifically, but I would imagine we'll see that late 2024, early 2025. So folks will be able to walk around the shopping center in October, but businesses will open moving north to south from now until, let's say, you know, next year, based on when they were initially finished in the shell phase.
And are you excited to finally see that kind of fruition coming together after several years?
I'm excited. Yeah, over 5 years is a long time to work on one project. But, you know, like I said, this is my hometown. This is where I live. This is where my family lives. And it's exciting to deliver something to West Norfolk that is not only needed, but also highlights what I think is an important piece of our city's history. So the answer is yes. I can't wait for it to be open. We're really focusing on the courtyard. There's going to be green space down the middle. I'd like to have a pumpkin patch, Christmas trees, holiday market, outdoor concert series, things like that. So yes, I'm very excited for us to near the finish line.
And have you seen that excitement spill out into the community? Or are you getting a lot of reception of excitement from folks nearby?
Yeah, definitely. As soon as we closed with the grocery store, my first call was to my contact at the Lambert's Point Civic League. So I've gotten to make a couple fun phone calls in the last few weeks, but that was the most rewarding. West Ghent is very excited about a new grocery store, contacts in Larchmont as well. We're starting to see a lot more excitement now that the building shells are nearing completion.
Cool. And do you have ambitions for another project after you guys wrap this one up yet, or too soon to tell?
Too soon to tell. I mean, I think I want to take a nap first. But yeah, we'll see. I know that there are apartments going up all over the place, but there is still demand for multifamily housing in the area. In particular, I guess I would say affordably priced market rate apartments. The city has an initiative called the Missing Middle Initiative, which is focused on delivering lower density, larger apartment community homes for small families or working professionals or couples who don't want to live in a large 100-unit development. So I'd love to be able to work on a project like that in the coming years, just because, you know, again, we talked about the quantitative, but there's also the qualitative aspect to delivering products. And qualitatively, I'd like to see Norfolk take the lead in Hampton Roads in delivering that type of housing.
Yeah, the Missing Middle pattern book that WPA
exactly.
did was, I think, exciting, and a lot of folks were excited to see that come through.
Did you guys cover it at all in Currents?
Yeah, we wrote an article on that back
sweet.
in who knows when now.
Yeah.
But we, I guess, haven't seen as many of those projects kind of come to fruition yet. As a real estate professional, do you have any insight into like maybe why it's tougher to get those actually on the ground?
Sure, yeah. Again, I'm not a politician. So in order to deliver missing middle housing, a variable needs to change. If you're looking at the total cost to deliver an apartment community, and without spending too much time on it, we've got, let's say, land, hard, which is a cost, hard cost, which is the physical structure, bricks and mortar, soft cost, which is architects, engineers, and construction financing and stuff like that. And then usually you have like a contingency budget in case there are overruns. In general, that's basically what it costs to deliver a structure. Because of due to market forces, supply and demand, I cannot affect what it costs to build a structure. Bricks are what they cost. I can look to hire the most efficient and effective soft cost partners, architects, engineers, GC, but that is also market driven. And then construction financing, which I'm sure your listeners know, as interest rates rise, that number also rises as well. That cannot be changed. So really the variable that can shift is the cost of land. And one of the powers that a municipality has is an ability to sell land when it achieves a strategic objective. And so the best way to deliver missing middle housing is for those who have the ability to sell land, to sell it very affordably, almost give it away to those who say they're going to deliver missing middle housing, given missing middle housing will be delivered at a particular rent or price per square foot. There are always challenges associated with doing something like that, but if it's just left up to the market, I don't think we'll see missing middle, just because, especially now, given interest rates, it's too expensive, and rents would be far beyond that which someone would necessarily be able to afford, because the units are bigger, right? So missing middle, lower density, higher units, or bigger units. So that's the biggest challenge, and I'm happy to be a part of these conversations, and I'd love to see it happen.
And do you see municipal zoning playing a role in that as well, or is that not a huge issue as folks are considering missing middle?
It depends how many buildings one wants to deliver within a set of missing middle housing. It's like, yes, certainly zoning can speed up the process, and that may save some money because time is money, so as you're working on a project. But at the end of the day, I have to spend a certain number of hours no matter what I do, whether I deliver a 100-unit apartment complex or a 6-unit apartment complex. The real issue is the cost. Yes, we can talk about economic costs, which is what you're talking about, but it's really just how much it costs at the end of the day to deliver the asset and what can I charge in rent in order not necessarily to make an incredible return, but what kind of return can I make such that I can get a loan from a bank to finance the operation and pay the debt service. Zoning is certainly a piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, so given all the finance, it might be a bit of a lull for a while for the 757 until we start seeing a lot more projects like that come to fruition.
When municipalities incentivize developers, developers act. So I think anything's possible, and I'd like to see it happen. I don't know, what kind of feedback did you guys get on Missing Middle when you all covered it in Currents?
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of comments from folks, and we'll love to see more comments on this conversation about folks being excited about that and excited to, have big units, like you say, and live in walkable neighborhoods and, hopefully not pay their whole paycheck into rent. So I think the idea seems to be like it has traction and fans, but, it always comes down to execution, right? So it could be Missing Middle, but be super pricey, and that might not be,
Yeah, and that's not approachable, and that's not the goal of Missing Middle. So, we could do an entire podcast just on Missing Middle and the challenges, and I'm happy to do that if it makes sense to do that in the future. But I'm glad there's feedback on that. It makes sense. My generation, and I guess I'm a millennial, and then the generation maybe after me, it's pretty difficult to afford a home right now. And many of my friends who are not yet homeowners are ready to move out of small apartments. They're married or they have a family, or maybe they're just ready for something a little bit larger, but they're not ready to purchase. There's a market. It's just, can we deliver the product?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, excited about the Railyard at Lambert's Point opening up, and I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about everything you're doing in the area.
Thanks so much. Like I said before we started the podcast, Currents is, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, the city's legitimate economic, civic, and cultural voice. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk about the project, and if there's ever anything else in the future that makes sense, I'm happy to come back on.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it, man. Absolutely. Great being
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Thanks.